Hello, good evening. Welcome to another Wednesday webinar. My name is Danai and I am an English tutor. I'm a qualified English teacher. And I'm so thankful that you've joined me this evening. Today, we are going to be looking at analyzing language in a non-fiction text. So as I said, my name is Danai. I am a qualified teacher and I qualified in 2017. I worked as a secondary school teacher until last year when my husband and I welcomed our daughter. I love baking, watching cooking shows, and playing tennis. So that's just a little bit about me so you don't feel like you're being taught by a stranger. Okay, so to start off with, you can write in the comments. I should have asked you this in the beginning, whether you can hear me. Just type yes to confirm that you can hear me. I can see a few more people have joined in. So I'll leave this page just for the people who joined in. Okay, I've had some confirmation. Thank you, Veronica. I've had some confirmation that you can all hear me. Good. Okay, so I would like you to have a think about what you feel like you might struggle with when it comes to analyzing non-fiction texts. Okay, so non-fiction meaning texts that are based on real life events. We'll look at some examples in a minute. So you can have a think about that now, or if anything comes up as the webinar goes on, you can type in the comments and I would be very happy to answer your questions. Okay, so have a think about that. And of course, we're focusing on language. So if you've got any questions regarding analyzing language at all, you can share those as well. Okay, so nonfiction texts include letters, newspaper articles, a recipe, an advert, a report. All of those things are nonfiction because they are, again, based on real life. I know these are the basics, but it's good to just make sure that we understand the basics before we carry on, okay? And nonfiction texts are something every GCSE student has to analyze. For most people, it's the paper 2, except for OCR, that's your paper 1. So it's something that you have to have a very good understanding on because it is something that you definitely have to analyze, and you also have to create a nonfiction text. You will have to write one as well. You never know which one you will be asked to do in your exam, so it's important to understand how a range of texts should be laid out. But today we're focusing on an article. Now, with nonfiction texts and looking at language in nonfiction texts, generally it's the same as fiction texts, okay? There are language techniques that you will see crossing over. However, there are some things that are a little bit more prominent or are used more to persuade the reader a little bit more in nonfiction texts, okay? So things that you might look out for are the tone that the writer uses, okay? Because nonfiction texts, they're usually to persuade, okay? That's the main purpose, to persuade and to convey a specific point of view, especially the nonfiction texts that you will encounter in your exam. They will be to portray a specific point of view, okay? So more commonly in an exam, you'll be asked to read or write a speech, an article, or a letter. And all of these things, point of view is very important. So the tone that the writer takes is important and will be suited to whatever their purpose is, okay? So tone, the writer could employ a humorous tone, they could use irony, they could be sarcastic, they could employ a serious or somber tone or a reflective tone. It all depends. And as we read, I would like you to have a think about what type of tone is being used. Also, in nonfiction texts, persuasive techniques that are used are some of the ones, examples of them are on the screen now, okay? Now, there might be different acronyms that you might use at school, like A Forest or A Forester or Da Forest. So I have combined a few there with de, forest, de. So it's just to help you remember these techniques, okay? And these are techniques that will come up in nonfiction texts, and some of them won't necessarily come up in fiction texts. For example, things like facts, okay? A fact is employed for persuasion, would be employed for persuasion, for example, in a newspaper article, and you won't necessarily see that in a story, in a fiction text. Same with opinions, statistics as well. You're not going to find statistics being used in in a fiction text like a novel or an extract from a novel, because it's just not useful for the purpose of persuasion. Okay, so things like alliteration, you will recognize that in fiction text as well. Things like rhetorical questions and even emotive language and repetition, those are things that do come up in fiction text as well, but there are techniques that are exclusive to nonfiction text, shall we say, okay? And they are on the screen there. So direct address, alliteration, anecdote, facts, opinion, rhetorical questions, emotive language. It's a long list, but that's why we have the acronym to help you remember, okay? I will have that on the screen as we read as well. So that's just a quick summary, but you don't really need that because you will know, I'm sure, your exam board, whether when you do your paper, when you do your nonfiction, just in case. Edexcel is paper 2, AQA is paper 2, OCR is your paper 1, and EDUCAS it's your paper 2, okay? So when we look at language, grade 9 responses tend to consider layers of meaning, embed their quotations, support their point with more than one quote, offer both word level analysis and wider analysis, and they consider alternative interpretations of the same idea. This is something we've gone through in previous webinars, if you've joined me before, for language, where we've looked at language and fiction texts, and these principles, they cross over to nonfiction texts as well. And we'll be looking at how to do that as we proceed. So the question that we are looking at today is, how has the writer used language to convey the mother's feelings about her son growing up? Okay, that's our question. So this is an extract from a Victorian newspaper article of the 1800s. The writer explores how she feels now that her son has grown up. And again, it's an article. So because we know it's an article, we know that, again, the writer can employ a range of some of those techniques that we've looked at. 1800s, meaning it's 19th century, and 19th century texts are texts you will have to encounter in your exam. So it's very good to be familiar with that. Okay. I'm not going to go through that part today. Okay, so a copy of the extract has been emailed to you, but if you do not have access to that, I will display it on the screen as we read. So before we read, I want to emphasize that the purpose informs the language, okay? And I want you to ask yourself what you think, what is the purpose of the article, okay? Why has this woman written this article? What is the purpose, okay? Because the purpose will inform what language is used in order to achieve the purpose, the stated purpose. So I've just circled the title because I want you to think, boy lost. Well, why title it that way? If you've read through this already, you can think very carefully now as we read again about the reasons why the writer has written this. Okay, so we'll read this through once and then we'll read sections and take a closer look. He had black eyes with long lashes, red cheeks, and hair almost black and almost curly. He wore a crimson plaid jacket with full trousers buttoned on, had a habit of whistling, and liked to ask questions. He was accompanied by a small black dog. It is a long while now since he disappeared. I have a very pleasant house and much company, my guests say. Ah, it is pleasant to be here. Everything has such an orderly, put away look. Nothing about, underfoot, no dirt. but my eyes are aching for the sight of cut paper upon the floor, of tumbled down card houses, of wooden sheep and cattle, of pop guns, bows and arrows, whips, tops, and go karts. I want to see the crumbs on the carpet and paste spilt on the kitchen table. I want to see the chairs and tables turned the wrong way about, yet these things used to fret me once. They say, "How quiet you are here! Ah, one here may be at peace." But my ears are aching for the pattering of little feet, for a hearty shout, a shrill whistle, for the crack of little whips, for the noise of drums and tin trumpets. Yet these things made me nervous once. They say, "Ah, you are not tied at home. How delightful to be always at liberty for concerts, lectures, and parties. No responsibilities for you." But I want responsibilities. I want to listen for the school bell of mornings, to give the last hasty wash and brush, and then to watch the windows' nimble feet bounding away to school. I want to replace lost buttons and obliterate mud stains, fruit stains, treacle stains, and paints of all colours. I want to be sitting by a little crib of evenings when weary feet are at rest and prattling voices are hushed, that mothers may sing their lullabies. They don't know their happiness then, those mothers. I didn't. All these things I called responsibilities once. A manly figure stands before me now. He is taller than I, has thick black whiskers, and wears a frock coat, billowy shirt, and cravat. He has just come from college. He calls me mother, but I am rather unwilling to own him. He stoutly declares that he is my boy and says he will prove it. He brings me his little boat to show the red stripe on the sail and then the name on the stern, Lucy Lowe, our neighbor's little girl, who, because of her long curls and pretty round face, was the chosen favorite of my little boy. How the red comes to his face when he shows me the name of the boat. And I see it all as plain as if it were written in a book. My little boy is lost, and my big boy will 30 soon be. I wish he was still a little boy, in a long white nightgown, lying in his crib, with me sitting by, holding his hand in mine, pushing the curls back from his forehead, watching his eyelids droop, and listening to his deep breathing. If only I had my little boy again. How patient I would be, how much I would bear, and how little I would fret and scold. I can never have him back again, but there are still many mothers who haven't yet lost their little boys. I wonder if they know they are living their very best days. That is now that now is the time to really enjoy their children. I think if I had been more to my little boy, I might be more to my grown up one. Okay, so that's the full extract. And again, you may have read this already, you may not have. But now we've read through it, what would you say is the purpose of this? What do you think the purpose of the article is? Why has she written it? Because that's really going to help in analyzing the language in this extract. So you can type in, why do you think she's written this article? I'll just give it 10 seconds for anyone who would like to have a go at sharing what they think the reason is for this article. If you're watching this on replay, you can add it to the comments. Why do you think the purpose? What do you think the purpose is? That she wants her little boy back. She does, okay? That's part of it. She's communicating that desire for her child back. Now, as when we start reading it, it may appear that her child is actually gone, but the child is not literally gone, as she reveals at the end. It's just that her son has grown up. And as the question tells us, it's about her feelings about her son growing up. Okay. So she's recounting her experience in order for other mothers to learn from her mistakes. okay? And to persuade them to cherish the time when their children are still young. So yes, she is narrating her desire for her grown up son to be small again, which is something we may or may not be able to relate to. I think parents generally might be able to relate to that. Um, but it's for the purpose of persuading other mothers, okay, to cherish that time. So, yes, it's about her experience, but the purpose is to persuade other mothers or other parents to cherish that time, okay? So, with that in mind, we're going to continue to analyze, okay? So, the first thing that we want to analyze is the title, okay? Because the title is quite emotive, okay? So, I want you to have a think. What impression does the title of the article establish about how the mother feels about her son growing up? What are the connotations of the word lost? And why might she have chosen the word boy considering her son has grown up? And because, again, this is a nonfiction texts have layout, set ways of being laid out. And an article will have a headline, sometimes subheadings, and this is the title, the headline of this article. So, and it's very important. There's a reason why. So, again, before we move on, think about the title, and this is something that you should do when you are analyzing a nonfiction text. Think about everything, okay, including the title. So, what impression does it establish about how she feels? Do you think it establishes a negative or positive impression? Boy lost. What do we think? Negative or positive impression? Or negative or positive emotion? What do we think about that title? So we'll have 10 seconds on that question before moving on. Thank you. Yes, it's negative, okay? In the sense that it's quite sad. Okay, great. Thank you. Got lots of comments from Rainbows and Ray. Thank you. Yes, so it's generally negative, and to be more specific, okay, there's a sense of sadness. Okay, you could even say with the word lost, there might be connotations of hopelessness as well. Okay, the idea of a boy, thinking about her choice of the word boy, boy implies child, okay? And children are vulnerable. Children need taken care of. So if somebody's saying a boy is lost, it's quite emotive, isn't it? It makes you think, it brings to mind how vulnerable that child might be, okay? So it's a very emotive title. And if you think again about trying to persuade, how persuasive that is, it does put the reader in quite an emotional state of mind and a sad state of mind because the mother herself is quite sad, okay? And it shows how hopeless maybe she feels and how sad she feels. Okay, so we're going to take a closer look at the first 3 paragraphs of the article. And I've put some questions in the pink box. And with those questions, I would like you to have a think and you can type in your answers and also make a note of these answers because later on we're going to write some paragraphs, okay? So you need these notes. So think about the opening 3 paragraphs. First of all, in the green box, think about what kind of tone is established and be as specific as you can, okay? Is it a humorous tone? Is it ironic, sarcastic, somber, reflective? And then in the yellow box in the middle, there are some of those techniques that we mentioned. Can you see any of them being used? Can you spot any other language techniques as well that are being used? And then moving over to the pink box, think about those questions, okay? Firstly, how does the mother feel about her son growing up? What word would you use? What is the effect of the past tense verb had in that opening paragraph? So it opens, he had black eyes, okay? So what's the effect of that past tense verb had? Third Question, what might the detailed description of the son's appearance remind readers of? Next question, what is the effect of the word disappeared to describe him growing up? What effect does including the opinions of others about her house have? And then lastly, what is the effect of repeating the phrase, I want? Okay, so Veronica says, reflective, there's use of opinion, and there's emotive language. Excellent. Yes, it is quite reflective. As she's thinking back on what people have said, as she's thinking back on what her son looked like at that age, there is the opinions of others are included in this as well, and there's a lot of emotive language. Yes, she describes her son as if he's missing, okay, as if she can't find him, and again, that's very emotive. Thank you, Rainbows. Thank you very much for that. Okay, and that all again feeds into quite a somber tone as well. It's reflective, but it's quite somber, meaning very sad. Okay. Good. Okay, so we'll move on to the next one. Okay. So the next section, okay, the next two paragraphs, again, thinking about the same things, but the questions are different. Okay. What effect does repeatedly including the opinions of others have? What does her detailed recount of her responsibilities as a mother highlight? What does they don't know their happiness then, those mothers, suggest about the purpose of the text? Now, we've talked about the purpose again, but you can actually explain this in your own words as well. So think again about the same things. So let's have maybe 2 minutes. I'll give you time to think and add to the comments. What do you think about this next section? Tone, the techniques, and the questions. When thinking about the repeated use of other people's opinions, what is that contrasted with? Okay, what is that contrasted with? Because that helps to think about why she's including that. What is it contrasted with? What comes after that? Immediately after she talks about what other people say, what does she follow that up with? So she follows it up with her contrasting emotions. Okay, so then there's a sense of irony there because what other people perceive is actually the opposite of how she's feeling. So it's ironic that people see her tidy home, the fact that she can go anywhere she wants whenever, as a great plus, because actually she's really suffering and she's really mourning for the time when her child was young and she was busy and tied at home. Okay, we'll look at the next section now. Okay, again, make sure you keep in mind some of the answers to these questions, okay, because we'll be using this when we're writing our paragraphs. Okay, so the next two paragraphs, okay, what is the effect of the present tense verb has? Okay, so think about what does it remind you of? Okay, what is the effect of the phrase manly figure? How does the anecdote about her son's boat add to the sense of pain about him growing up? So, an anecdote is a short, amusing, or interesting story that is included in order to prove a point or to make a point. So, she inserts this story of her son showing him his boat that he's named after a love interest, the girl next door. Okay. So, what's the point of that story? What does it add? And then what does the anecdote emphasize? So again, thinking about her feelings about her son growing up, what does this anecdote emphasize about how she feels? And then lastly, how does the adverb stoutly portray her son? Okay, does it help portray him as the little boy that she remembers and cherishes and misses, or does it help to portray him as the manly figure that he's now become? And again, how does that link with how she feels about him? So we'll stay here for a few seconds to see if we have any comments before moving on. Okay, so Rainbows says she is exaggerating what he looks like. What makes you say that? Which quote would you use for that one? What makes you think it's exaggeration? Stoutly, yes, it makes him seem almost unrecognizable. Yes, from the little boy that she was um, describing. Thick black whisks. Ah, thick black whiskers. Okay. So she's really, you can say that she's really emphasizing how he's grown up, how he's aged. Okay, good. And a manly figure, um, it's quite there's a distance there. It's quite impersonal, isn't it, as well? So she's describing him as a man, but there's a distance that she's expressing. Okay, a manly figure stands before me now. Okay, so there's a bit of a distance there in her way of describing him. Okay, great. Thank you for those comments. Um, good. Right. So the final part now. Okay, before we get to writing some paragraphs. This is the final two paragraphs. So what are some examples of emotive language in this part of the text? So any quotes that you think are quite emotive at this part, please add them. Which parts of the text here explicitly demonstrate its didactic purpose? So when we're thinking about purpose here, didactic means something that teaches, okay? So there are parts here that where she's actually expressing that quite explicitly. So can you identify those quotes where she's showing that she's teaching? So a didactic text is a text that seeks to teach a lesson of some sort. The third question, what does the phrase very best days tell us about how she feels about her son growing up? So the fact that she describes the days that have gone as the very best days, how does it emphasize what she feels about him growing up? What is the effect of the rhetorical question? I wonder if they know they are living their very best days. And what is the tone of the concluding sentence? So, any of those questions that you'd like to answer, add them to the comments and we can have a talk about them. But yes, great contributions so far. Thank you very much, everyone who's been sharing their thoughts. So again, any examples of emotive language, any quotes that show emotive language, and any quotes that demonstrate her explicitly um, teaching something. Yes, so I'll just share that. So yes, Rainbow said the last sentence tone is reflective and regretful. Excellent. Okay, it does communicate a sense of regret. It does, because it says, I think if I had been more to my little boy, I might now be more to my grown up one. So there is that. Its purpose is to teach us to appreciate the time we have and not to rush through your life. Enjoy the mess. It's gone too soon. She wishes she had that little boy again. Thank you, Gillian. Yes. Okay. Definitely. Okay. It wants to teach us to appreciate the time that we have because it is soon gone. And reading this, as a fairly new mum, it was quite emotive for me. I was like, oh. So as I was reading, it was quite interesting as a read for me, and definitely it is seeking to do that, and it does that quite emotively. It does that quite emotively. Okay, thank you very much. So we're now going to move on to the writing part, okay, where you have a go at writing an extended response. So when you're writing, I want you to consider. So I'm reading from the box in the middle, the orange box in the middle with the bullet points. Think about layers and meaning. Okay, can you think about layers and meaning as in giving more than one explanation? Okay, so for example, actually, the comment just where was it? Rainbows. I'll show you a comment there. The last sentence is reflective and regretful as well. So if you were to expand on that, you could have two. It's like it's already layered because in that final sentence there is a sense of regret. There is also it's quite reflective. And if you could demonstrate that you're thinking about layers of meaning as opposed to just thinking about one interpretation. Secondly, embed your quotations. So try and make your quotations a part of the sentence. So what do I mean by that? I'm going to read the example in blue in the box in the box on the bottom of the screen. And what you'll notice is before I include my example, I don't introduce my example and say, for example, it says, okay, or she writes. I don't introduce my quote. I just make it flow with my writing. And I indicate it's a quote, obviously using quotation marks. So when you embed quotes, you still use your quotation marks. But the idea of embedding a quote is if it was being read out loud, you wouldn't necessarily know where the quote is unless you know the text. Okay. So the example reads, the writer uses an emotive title to convey her sense of loss now that her son has grown up. His disappearance, which has been a long while now, okay, so you can see the quote is there, is metaphorical. But I haven't introduced it. I haven't said his disappearance, which is shown in the quote as having been a long while now. I haven't done that. I've just embedded it, okay? So aim to embed your quotes. Secondly, support your point with more than one quote. Okay, so as you can see in that response, I haven't just used one quote, I've layered my quotations and I'm layering my analysis. Offer both word level analysis and wider analysis. So that means that, for example, if you consider the tone, okay, and if you say the writer uses a somber tone or employs a somber tone in order to demonstrate her sadness. So tone is the wider technique, okay? But then if you zoom in on a word in your quote, then um, you are engaging in word level analysis, okay? So if you can do that, that is a higher level way of analysis. It's a grade 9 way of analyzing. And then consider alternative interpretations of the same idea. So if you look at something as quite positive, maybe you can look at the negative aspect of it, okay? Or again, if we think about something that might be quite seen as quite sad, okay? On the other hand, it offers a teaching lesson, okay? So there's alternative interpretations. Okay, so I would like you to try and write a response. I've put some quotes in the white box, okay? And the quotes read as follows: "My ears are aching for the pattering of little feet." Second quote, they say, "You are not tied at home." And then the third quote, "But I want responsibilities. I want to listen for the bell of school mornings." Okay, so see if you can use those three quotes in a response. I'll read the full example now. Okay, so this is how you might structure your response. So the example reads: "The writer uses an emotive title to convey her sense of loss now that her son has grown up. His disappearance, which has been a long while now, is metaphorical. This emphasizes the mother's sadness. Her detailed recount of his black eyes, long lashes, and red cheeks and curly hair is similar to a description that may be given when someone is looking for someone who is missing. This conveys a sense that she deeply longs to relive the time when her son was still a young boy. It also implies the risks and dangers of adulthood are a concern that is adding to her sadness about her son growing up." Okay, so in that analysis, I've picked up on the sense of loss in that title. Okay, I've backed it up with more quotes that show her doing the same thing. Okay, so all the quotes I've picked, they're working together to prove that point about the mother feeling quite sad. Okay, and the idea of her son being lost and missing. Okay, and then I finally conclude with the alternative idea or the layering of the idea that maybe the dangers of growing up are adding to her feeling quite sad. Okay, so it's like I've built up my case and I've built up my point by supporting it with related quotes, okay, and analyzing throughout. So I will give you 5 minutes, okay? I'll put the timer on. You won't be able to see it on your screen, but I'll try and say when it's halfway through the time. And you can follow point evidence, point evidence, explain the technique, and then link back to the question and the purpose, okay, as a rough guide of how you can lay out your paragraph. But basically, try and do the bullet points, okay, in terms of considering the layers in meaning, embedding your quotations. And again, those questions that we were thinking about earlier on, they'll come into play as well. So hopefully you are making notes and thinking about those, some of those ideas. Okay, so 5 minutes. Let me just check. Yes. Okay, so the examples from the first section of the text, but the quotes in your screen are from the next section. Okay, right. 5 minutes then. I've started the timer, so have a go. And then afterwards, if you'd like to, you can share your paragraphs. And if you're happy to, I'll share them on the screen as well. If you don't want your responses shared on the screen, then just let me know in the comments so I don't do that. Otherwise, I'll share them just for us to look at them together. Okay, so yeah, 5 minutes have started. 2 minutes left. 2 minutes left of the 5 minutes. Okay, 5 minutes is up. So hopefully you've had a chance to write your response. Feel free to add it to the comments. If you'd like me to have a look, if you'd like me to give you any feedback on it, you can add it to the comments. Okay, in the meantime, we'll look at the example. So, the metaphor "my ears are aching" highlights how she misses hearing the pattering of little feet. The repeated verb "want" conveys a sense of desire and suggests she looks back on her responsibilities with a sense of enjoyment and pleasure. The fact that she can no longer have any of that emphasizes her sense of sadness. Furthermore, the writer repeatedly contrasts what her guests say with how she feels about having no responsibilities to highlight the irony of her situation. The use of positive adjectives like delightful and pleasant by a guest contrasts her aching for the time her son was young. Okay, so that's what you could have written, and it's not the only thing you could have written, of course. You might have something completely different. And again, you can add your example to the screen if you'd like me to have a look. Let me just scroll to make sure I'm not missing anything there. Okay, so we'll move on to the next one then. Okay, see what you think about this one. So, oh, I'm sorry about that one. I forgot to change the color in there. So the writer uses descriptive. Okay, so good. So I'll just share that. We'll have a read. Thank you, Rainbow. So the writer uses descriptive language to portray her sense of regret now that her son has grown up. The metaphor, "my ears are aching," she feels as if she has taken her time with her son when he was young. Okay, good. To portray her sense of regret. So yes, good point. Okay, the sense of regret. And yes, that's a metaphor. Good. Um, she feels as if she has taken her time. Oh, for granted. Thank you. I was looking for that. She has taken her time for granted. Good. Um, Good. So what you can do, you can think as well about that verb, not verb, adjective, aching. Okay. What does that convey as well? What could you add to that? But that's a really good response. It's a great clear point with a clear example, and you're indicating language there, metaphor. Next one. So thank you for that, rainbows. Okay. The writer uses both metaphor and exaggeration, but my ears are aching for the pattering of little feet to emphasize how much and how strongly she misses the time when her son was young. Good. So you pointed to good. You pointed to the metaphor and yes, exaggeration because her ears are literally are not aching, and it is emphasizing how strongly she does miss her son. Good. Similar to rainbows, you can just zoom in on there because you've looked at the wider techniques there, okay, like the metaphor. So then you can zoom in. I know 5 minutes as well isn't a long time, but that's what you can think about for the next one. Okay, you're looking at starting to analyze wider techniques, but think about zooming in as well on specific words that help to really bolster and support your points, the point that you're making. Okay, great. Thank you for sharing those. Really good responses. Sorry, I've skipped past. Okay, so the next one, okay, the next quotes, I've put 4 quotes. You don't have to use all of them, okay? And the example is the same. So, a manly figure stands before me now. So, think about that quote. How is it adding to her sense of sadness as he's grown up? We had a chat about that earlier as well. So, you can, if you remember, you can add that in. He brings me his little boat to show the red stripes on the sail and the name on the stern, Lucy Lowe. Sorry that that's not very clear in that part. I forgot to change the color for that. But that use of anecdote, okay? What is the effect of that anecdote when she's telling us about him showing us the boat, okay? Next, but my eyes are aching for the sight of the paper cut upon the floor. And then my guests say, it is pleasant to be here. Okay. So think about those quotes and try and write a response again. 5 minutes. And I'll repeat what I said before. We've been analyzing the wider techniques really well, but let's aim to zoom in. Okay. So aim to zoom in this time. Look at the wider technique and then straight away zoom in on a particular word. So if you pick the anecdote or a metaphor or anything like that, zoom in as well and analyze that. Okay, the timer is starting now. 5 minutes, go. Okay, we're halfway through, 2.5 minutes, halfway through. Just 1 minute left. Well done, you're doing really well. 1 minute left. Okay, so well done. Rainbows, you said the writer uses direct speech, good, to show that what other people are saying, contrasting with what she wants, which is cut paper on the floor, good, okay? And she's using that again to create that sense of irony, so very good. And then you zoomed in, I'm glad to see that. She emphasizes this with the adjective aching, okay, good, very good. And again, with what her guests say or what they say, as she puts it, those adjectives like pleasant, they're contrasting, okay, with how she's feeling. So well done for that. Thank you for sharing that. And well done for zooming in as well. Okay, if anyone else has anything else to share, please do. But we've reached the end. We're not going to have time to do another one. So I'll just say if you have any questions, okay? If you have any questions, please add them. And also, if you found this video helpful, just like the video, please. If you found this webinar helpful, just add a like, which I will find really helpful. So thank you in advance for that. If you've got any questions about anything we've done today, anything that you're not sure about, again, in terms of nonfiction texts, the important thing I'll add is that you will have to write a nonfiction text yourself, okay? So as you already know, you would have done your mocks by now. You have section A, you have section B. Section A, you analyze, like we've been doing today. You analyze a text. Section B, you write a text, okay? So with nonfiction text, it's really important that you know the structural differences. And next week, we're going to look at the same text, but we're going to focus on the structure. Okay. So you can next week, that's what we'll look at. We'll look at the very same text, but we'll focus specifically on the structure of this specific article. It's really important. One writing question is 40 marks, okay? But you need to know how to structure different nonfiction texts, because how you write an article is different from how you write a letter, different from how you write a speech, okay? If you would like to join one of my classes, I have a mastery group on Thursdays. I have a writing group on Thursdays as well. 11 plus, I don't think we'll have any 11 plus in this webinar today. But I also have Key Stage 3 reading and writing on Fridays, okay? So if you're interested in any of that, you can send me an email. If you wanted to join one of my groups, you can send me an email and I can give you more information about that. But apart from that, that's all for today. I'm so pleased about how much people have contributed. It makes such a difference. And I'm glad to be able to obviously give you feedback as well. It makes it more useful for you if you actually get feedback to your work. So really good. And thank you so much for joining me. Again, next week we'll be focusing on the structure of the text. We've looked at language today, but we'll look at the exact same text next week, but we'll focus on structure, okay? So that's it from me today, and I hope you have a really good evening, really good week, and maybe see you next week. But that's it for today, so bye. That's it, and well done as well. Oh, thank you, Rainbows. You're welcome. Thanks for joining. Thank you for joining. I'm glad you found it useful. Thank you, Veronica. Thanks for joining. Have a good evening. You're welcome.